The vibration in the arena floor told Kale everything his eyes couldn't track. The Grendel Prime, a monolith of bioengineered muscle and chitin, was too heavy to stop its own momentum once committed. Kale didn't try to block the blow that could shatter a starship hull. He simply wasn't there when it landed. Dust erupted. The shock wave rattled Kale's teeth, but he was already moving, sliding through the debris field. His breathing was a ragged rhythm, a sharp counterpoint to the thunderous roar of the Idle-Guard crowds calling for his blood. He glanced up, just for a fraction of a second, to the high balcony. Varia was there. The Heir's knuckles were white as she gripped the railing, her composure fracturing under the weight of the spectacle. He caught her gaze across the chaos and anchor in the storm. She had bet her birthright on him. He refused to let her lose. Strength breaks, the mind endures. The beast roared, pivoting with unnatural speed for its size, but Kale had already catalogued the twitch in its left flank that preceded the turn. Pattern recognition was his shield. Anticipation was his sword. He wasn't fighting the monster. He was solving it. The sensory overload of the arena dissolved, replaced by the sterile, blinding light of the High Council chamber 3 days prior. The silence in the room had been absolute, sharp enough to cut glass. Varia stood before the Matriarch, her posture rigid, defying centuries of genetic protocol. The Matriarch, a towering figure of perfection whose skin shimmered with subdermal augments, looked down at the human standing beside her daughter with barely concealed revulsion. "He is small," the Matriarch had said, her voice a harmonious hum that belied the cruelty of her words. "He is fragile. He is obsolete. He is my choice." Varia had replied, her voice ringing clear. Kale remembered the weight of the stares from the Imperial Guard-elite biological killing machines who viewed him as little more than a glitched variable in a perfect equation. They had mocked him in the staging area, flexing synthetic muscles that could crush diamonds, laughing at his soft skin and unaugmented bones. They trained to kill. He trained to survive. The Matriarch descended from the dais, circling Kale like a predator inspecting a wounded animal. "You speak of him as a champion," she sneered, "but look at him. His heart rate is elevated. He reeks of cortisol. He is afraid." "I am," Kale had interrupted, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. He met the Matriarch's golden gaze. "Fear keeps you sharp. Fear makes you calculate risks. Acknowledging fear is more courageous and practical than suppressing it." The audacity of a baseline human speaking to the Matriarch sent a ripple through the gathered court. Varia stepped closer to him, a subtle display of soft power, uniting her status with his vulnerability. "Then let us test this practical courage," the Matriarch declared. "If he survives the rites of ascendance, he may serve. If not, his failure will be the lesson you require, daughter." Back in the arena, the memory shattered as the Grendel Prime lunged. The beast's claws tore through the air where Kale's head had been a microsecond before. He rolled, coming up in a crouch near the weapon rack. He didn't reach for the plasma lance or the monosword. He grabbed a coil of high-tensile wire and a canister of liquid coolant. The crowd booed the unglamorous choice. They wanted a clash of steel and bone. They didn't understand that a drop of water eventually splits the stone. Kale wasn't going to overpower the beast. He was going to dismantle it piece by piece, using the very environment designed to kill him. The coolant canister hissed through the air, an improvised grenade against a god of war. Kale didn't aim for the Grendel Prime's armored torso. He aimed for the subterranean heat vents the beast had been pacing over. Timing was a razor's edge. He threw the canister and dove. The explosion wasn't fiery, it was thermal shock. The supercooled liquid slammed into the superheated vent grating, creating a blinding cloud of expanding vapor. The Grendel roared, blinded and disoriented, its thermal sensors washed out by the sudden temperature plunge. But Kale wasn't alone in the ring. 3 other aspirants at Guard elites who had sneered at him earlier were pinned near the perimeter, battered and waiting for the end. They were paralyzed by the break in their training algorithms. The beast wasn't behaving according to the simulation. Kale slid across the polished floor, grabbing the ankle of the nearest gladiator, a massive warrior named Torian. "Move!" Kale barked, his voice cutting through the panic. It's blind, not deaf. Stop fighting the enemy you trained for and fight the one in front of you. Torian looked down, confused by the command coming from the small creature, but the clarity in Kale's eyes was infectious. Soft power was not about physical dominance. It was about directing the flow of energy. Kale pointed to the confused beast trashing in the vapor. I'll draw its fire. You hit the joint behind the knee. It's unshielded when it overheats. Kale didn't wait for confirmation. He sprinted into the open, snapping the high tensile wire against the ground like a whip. The sound cut through the vapor. The Grendel turned, locking onto the noise, charging with terrifying speed. Kale held his ground, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, waiting for the heavy footfall to shake the floorboards. Now, he screamed. Torian and the others moved. They didn't move as individuals seeking glory, but as a unit guided by a central intelligence. Torian's kinetic hammer slammed into the beast's knee just as its weight transferred. The joint, brittle from the thermal shock, shattered with the sound of a thunderclap. The Grendel fell. The arena shook. Dust swirled in the sudden silence. The beast lay still, incapacitated by physics and cooperation rather than brute strength. Kale stood amidst the giants, his chest heaving, a bruise blooming on his cheek, but alive. He looked up. The holographic cheering of the crowd was deafening, but Kale only saw Varia. She was running down the stairs of the dais, vaulting the containment barrier. She hit the sand and didn't stop until she was in front of him. She didn't care about the cameras with the cord. She grabbed his face, her hands trembling, checking in for breaks, for blood. You calculated that, she breathed, her forehead resting against his. You crazy, brilliant variable. I just played the odds, Kale whispered, the adrenaline finally fading into exhaustion. The slow clap of the Matriarch silenced the arena. She descended the final steps, her golden eyes unreadable. She looked at the defeated bioweapon, then at the elite warriors who were helping each other up, and finally at the human. You turned my wolves into a pack, the Matriarch said, her voice amplified across the stadium. You lack the gene seed, yet you command the field. She turned to the cameras. Let it be known, strength without direction is merely mass. The human ascends. Varia smiled, a fierce, radiant expression that promised a new era. She took Kale's hand, lacing her fingers through his. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time they weren't looking at the size of the weapon, but at the will of the wielder.